Hello, Paige. It's time for last Monday marketing chats. It is the end of July, and we are here to talk about nightmare client conversations. We all have them, and how we can use AI to help us get through them a little better.
Yes.
And I know you
I
have
love a nightmare
situations.
client.
And I think that's the thing is that however well we set up our workflows, which is what our email templates are designed to do, they can really minimize how many times you have to speak to a difficult client, but they're not going to remove it completely. We cannot get that number down to zero because we're human and they're human, and it just doesn't happen that way, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um, so I know that you have really dropped how many situations like that you've had to talk to people about since you put a kind of better workflow in place and really thought
Yeah,
about
big
client
time.
experience. But maybe that means you don't often have to think about it. And when you do, you're kind of like scrambling to say, oh my goodness, how do I quickly reply, politely reply, hold my boundaries at the same time, don't give away more than I want. And crucially, one of the things we've been thinking about is how do I think about how this leads into my whole business strategy so I don't end up losing a ton of money or time in the process.
Yeah. I mean, I think that with all this stuff, like the more you have listed online, the more you explain it to a client, the more you cover your base, like your ass while you're doing it, basically, the better you're going to be in those situations. But like you said, like they're still going to come up here and there. You're still going to have to deal with it. And so then when they do, how do you respond? And I think some of this stuff is like knowing how to talk professionally or speak professionally to your clients and like how do you present yourself, which is so massive. And a lot of people like underestimate that side of that communication part of it. And ChatGPT or Claude or any of these sort of systems can really improve your ability to keep it very professional when you're mad,
Mhm.
especially when you're mad, because it's so easy to like reactively send that email,
Yes.
answer the phone when they call and get mad and not have thought through all the things.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that in an ideal world, they would have a confusion or a complaint or a question, but they would be thinking it through logically. But they don't.
They
There's human
don't.
emotions
Yeah.
involved at their end as well, which means that you're reacting to a human emotion, and that's where mix-ups can happen. People say things they don't mean, or they misinterpret things you've been very clear about.
Mhm.
So that's where I think sometimes a being calm and think being responding carefully can help, but also where we have to be careful with AI because the person who is feeling emotions as they listen to you will read anything into what you say if it's not quite right. And if they sense that there's some kind of meaning behind it, you're being passive aggressive, it's not really quite you, then that can make things worse as well. So AI can be a bit of a double-edged sword with this. And so learning to use it correctly is key.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, the biggest thing is always like when you do have a client situation, you should always get on the phone with them, like ultimately, because when you write anything, they take that everything the way that they're thinking of it in their head, and they're in a negative space. So they're gonna read your email thinking or your text thinking that you're being negative to them, even if you're like, no, 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 I wrote that really nice. Like it was very polite and friendly. Like they didn't read it that way. So using AI to help you figure out what to say on the phone or answer that email in a way that just says we need to get on the phone is big.
Yeah,
Big. It can't
huge.
do the legwork for you, and if you try to make it, it's just gonna.
Yeah, well, and I think the key about talking in person, not that this is what this is about, but it would be very easy just to take an AI response and think you've done your job because you had replied with an email AI wrote. But what you can hear when you have a conversation is those human elements. Are they getting more distressed? Are they starting to realize what you're saying? Are they repeating your words, in which case they're maybe processing what you're saying and thinking about it? I actually
Yeah.
watched a really interesting, I think it was an Instagram reel the other day, and it was a hairdresser who was showing the reveal where their client turned around. And it was obviously pretend, but they were using it to recreate a bad client experience. And the client said, oh my goodness, my hair is so brassy and yellow. I hate this. What have you done? And the hairstylist was talking about the difference between just sending them on their way and talking them through what had happened to the point where they started to calm down and figure out how to get out of it, where actually it wasn't such a terrible end result for them.
Yeah.
And how those conversations can flow and they don't always end up as bad as you think, depending on what's happening. Or sometimes they do, which is another example we have. Would you like to tell us about your client experience this week?
Sure. So I had this client who, well, not a client, but this woman who had signed up for a pre-session consult. We offer free consults to come into the studio, do a tour, kind of sit down and learn about our process. So she had booked that about a month ago. It was on the calendar. We confirmed her appointment. She showed up. We had this awesome chat. I was so excited because if anyone's watching this down the road, like the newborn photography industry has been in the dumps this year, everywhere, all across Facebook. Everyone is complaining about how it's gone down. I've seen all these statistics about how it's down 13%, it's down 20%, it's down 30%. And I don't know what number is true. It feels like 100% some days. But so I was all excited because I had this belly to baby consult. She came
And
in.
belly to baby means.
It's maternity and newborn together. So she wanted to do both sessions. And she wanted to do studio. She had all these ideas for her maternity shoot. She wanted to do these like boudoir style looks and had lots of ideas. Was all excited, looked through the client closet, everything, right? She told me all about her family. I felt like we had this lovely connection. And at the end of the consult, I said, great, here's all the pricing. I went through how everything works. She looked at all. She was like, okay, I just want to make sure. She reiterated a lot of things back to me. So I was like, yeah, she gets it. And then I said, do you want to book now or would you like to go home and talk to your husband? And this is the part that like bugs me, right?
Hmm.
And oh, and another thing that happened that is also key to this story is in the middle of our consultation, her phone rang and it was her husband. And she said, I can't talk right now. I'm at the photography studio doing our consult. And I was like, great. Okay. So fast forward an hour later, I have closed the studio. I'm getting my kids from gymnastics practice. I'm back in mom mode. And she calls in, or she sends me a text and it says that she wants to know what my cancellation policy is. And now, like for me, I get this question a lot from moms that are nervous. So it's not necessarily like, I want to cancel my session with you. It's just, what happens if? Like,
What might go
what
wrong?
if what if my baby's born super early? What if like yeah, I don't get to do the maternity shoot because I have the baby, or what if the baby's sick and in the NICU and like we can't do it at 2 weeks old? What does that look like? And so a lot of times I will get that question about like how do I get my money back? And so I have to reassure these clients through, don't worry, like if you have your baby early, we can apply your maternity fees to the newborn session. If your baby's born and we can't do a session right away, we can do it anytime in that first full year. So we have all these things in place that we don't have to give a refund because obviously I don't want to
Right.
refund someone their
And
money.
I think the key about this is that mostly people don't want a refund. They ask
Yeah.
the question of cancellation policies, but what that really means is I do not know how this process is going to go with my
Yeah.
baby, my and given birth. And you know that, and you're there to reassure them. However your situation looks, we can make it work. And that's,
Yeah.
I'm going to guess, 99% of the time, exactly what they need to hear.
Yeah. And so this is a part where I went wrong in my community. And like, you have to kind of look at these situations and look back and be like, where did I screw this up? And one of the things that I screwed up is I always email over their contract. I don't have them sign that in the studio. And that was a mistake. I should have had her sign the contract in the studio rather than sending it to sign later.
Yeah, yeah.
So a mistake number one, right there. Mistake number two was when she texted me and said, what's your cancellation policy? I responded with our cancellation policy, which is that this, so ours is a session fee plus our smallest collection is what they pay for up front.
Yeah.
And that smallest collection is refundable for the entire time up until 30 days before their session date. So 30 days before their maternity shoot or 30 days before their due date for the newborn.
Yeah.
After which point, everything is non-refundable. It can be transferred, but it's
Hmm.
not refundable. So, so she has spent $1,880 on her maternity and newborn combo package. And of that, $700 would have been session fees.
Yeah.
So that's what I said in my text message. I said $1,180 would be refundable. Those are your base packages, but the session fees would not be. And I just left it at that. So I shouldn't have answered that via text message. I should have called her and explained and gotten a better understanding of what she was looking for.
Mhm.
But I was in mom mode. I was busy. I didn't have time to answer her. And I thought we had this great connection an hour ago. So
It
clearly,
all had felt very good that same day.
yeah.
And I think this does also talk to the fact that as a business owner, in an ideal world, you're working just your office hours. But when
Mhm.
you're working with pregnant moms, you're probably always answering questions in and out of office hours. So do you say that you're not going to reply till you have time to sit at your desk? But that might not be till tomorrow. And is that fair to the client who's asked a question? So there's that balance in the mix as well there, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I just think that, it's all a little tricky. Like I really do believe that text messaging works very, very well for our business. I think it's a great way to communicate in, as far as like little reminders and pieces of information, links and that sort of thing. It's not the place for like contract stuff.
Mhm.
And so it gets a little sticky because you're communicating with them via text message for these other things.
Yeah.
They think they can ask questions like that. And so
Right.
it gets a little. Anyway, so then she calls me. I can't answer the phone because I'm in mom mode and leaves me a message and says that her husband had already booked a newborn shoot and she didn't know about it. And I was like, well, that's confusing because your husband knew that you were at this
Sure.
consult because he called in the middle of it. And so I heard that tag or heard that message and was like, okay, great. So she really does want to cancel. And she says, okay, well, what if we just kept the maternity shoot? What would that look like? And so I didn't respond to that right away. And all I said was, would you have time to talk on the phone tomorrow? I'm with my kids right now and we're doing dinner and everything. So I definitely want to talk this through with you. Would you have time tomorrow? And
Which
she's,
then key is that you did respond.
I
You
did
didn't
respond.
respond with details. It's not like you left her on red.
Yeah. No, I responded and let her know that I was already out of the studio for the day and that I would love to talk to her and explain what our options would be. And she said, I can talk at noon. And then she said, if we don't get a chance to connect tomorrow, I've sent you an email. And so then I checked my email and I had a nasty email from her that said that I needed to do the right thing and refund her money and et cetera, et cetera. She didn't want to work with me anymore. No explanation for why she had a complete change of heart in that. She had said over the phone that her husband had booked a newborn session, but in the email, she had said nothing like that. So the next day when we talked on the phone, she said that her husband had booked both a maternity and a newborn shoot, which so like what line number 19? I don't know. Um, and she just wanted to cancel the whole thing. So this is how we got to the AI thing. Long story short, I asked AI that night, I was like, okay, I need to respond to this woman in a kind but professional way to be clear about my cancellation policies. And one of my cancellation policies is that our minimum, like non-refundable, is the $200 session fee. That's for our smallest session. So like our just the baby session fee is 200. All of our like family sessions, cake smash, everything like that has a $200 session fee. And so I needed to make sure that she understood that she was getting charged that no matter what. It doesn't matter if it's 5 minutes afterwards or 5 weeks after booking, we charge that $200. And the reason why we do that is because Square does not refund processing fees. So for an $1,800 photo shoot, that's almost $50 worth of fees. And I'm not eating that. And then my studio manager deals with all of the admin stuff. So even if it's 5 minutes later, she's putting all your details in and she's working on your account immediately and making sure everything is up to date and she's got all the notes. And
You've
so,
also held time potentially in calendars. You've held space that you think that you have a client, which maybe would affect conversations you have with other potential clients.
I mean, an
Which
hour later, you could argue that like I didn't really hold her space very long. But if it was more than an hour, then yes,
Mhm.
for sure, I
Yeah.
would have.
And then at what point is the line though? Is that the next day?
Yeah.
Like what if you had happened to have a conversation with somebody? So I don't feel like you need to justify those to a
No,
client
I
with the
don't think so,
exact
but I
details.
I feel like I need to justify it to any newborn photographers listening
Yes,
to
yes.
this because I think a lot of people would say, "Well, she booked an hour ago, just refund her money." And I understand that perspective 100%, especially like as a consumer, I would feel that way too. Except we do have Square processing fees and admin time and all that sort of stuff that goes into setting someone up in our system. And and I spent all evening stressed about what to talk to her about and then had to have a phone call with her the next day. So I spent hours on
Thinking
hers.
about this, yeah. And I think that's another thing to think about, which we've talked about before, is being aware of the true cost of your business
Yeah.
time per client. And that includes the lead stage at before they've booked. Now, that time we usually write off, but we assume it's a certain amount of time that we spend per potential client. And then
Yeah.
once they sign the contract, what all is involved for you to do? Because again, it feels really easy at an hour that you've not spent too much time. Some people may not have spent any time yet because they haven't gone to their computer. But what if it's a week
Yeah.
later? What if you did start that night, but you don't normally for a few days? Like if you haven't really thought through how much time and effort and work and fees are involved, then you don't know what your true loss is if you're having that conversation with a client.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel very justified in charging that $200 session cancellation fee. And I've got it in my contract and it's on my
Well, I was
website.
going to say it's a contractual term, so honestly,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And then the problem is that if you feel like, oh, I should break my contract terms, which you sometimes choose to do because you don't want negative publicity, because maybe there is a way to work together in the future or they pass on your name, then how do you break the terms in a way that feels fair to you and fair to them? It's a difficult balance.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where AI comes in, is helping you to kind of work through how do I say this in a way that's professional? How do I get it clear that I'm being fair and reasonable and doing the right thing for my business as well as for you as the client? And so I really wanted to, I used AI to try and figure out how to explain to her because technically she had $700 worth of session fees. So contractually, I could have said, sorry,
Deal
like,
done.
it's $700 worth of fees, right? But that didn't feel right to me. That didn't feel fair. She really had booked an hour before. So I'm not keeping her $700. But if I just say it's a $200 cancellation fee, I think she's going to come back at me and be pretty mad about that. And I wanted to explain it that I'm not going to keep her $700, but there is a $200
Right.
cancellation
And
fee. And
also,
here's
it's
how
not
I priced it.
zero because you would lose out at zero. So there has to be some number between 0 and 700 that feels appropriate. And also, the key is the why it feels appropriate. It's that you want to be able to explain it like succinctly enough that you're not rambling on and bringing in side arguments that are maybe not directly relevant because you are feeling emotional and trying to justify what you're doing. And it can be really easy in that when you're doing that to start bringing in things that maybe don't feel relevant to the person listening. And then that just adds to their frustration.
Yes. Yeah. Let's try to not really infuriate this client.
Well, and I think so that to the point of there being a potential that the client had made exaggerated or made up some things that they talked about in the conversation, it definitely sounds to me like that might have been going on. But I think when we talked about this before, we mentioned sometimes people do that. They're defensive. They don't want to explain to you why they actually just changed their mind, or
Yeah.
maybe her husband just said, "This is too expensive. We're not doing
That's
it,"
fine.
and she's like, I don't want to get into a back and forth with you, so I'm just going to pretend that my husband booked.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think it's the right way to have the conversation, but I can kind of understand how people get themselves into that.
Yeah.
But then what that triggers for us is this unfairness of like, don't lie to me about this. This feels unfair to me. And so where I think AI helps with that is if you had started to go down that road, she's going to get more defensive and aggressive. You're going to get more mad. Like it's not going to help resolve, but it's really
Right.
easy in a conversation to kind of accidentally go down that road. And now you're stuck yelling at each other over the phone about who's lying about what. So for
Well, the
to
thing
help
that's like,
AI stay on point, I think is really important.
oh yeah. No, I was just gonna say, I think the thing that's important to remember is that like unfortunately, in these situations, the business owner is the bad guy. It doesn't matter that we've tried to do everything right, that like it's me, it's my studio, and I have one little assistant. Like, I'm not some big brand that like $50 of processing fees, like whatever, we're just gonna throw it away. Like, that all matters to me and my family. And so the time and the effort in those processing fees all add up. But she doesn't see it that way. She sees it as a business that should give you all your money back. And that's that.
Or
So
maybe
I need to
even
protect the I just mean like as the two parties involved, the
mhm,
business is always going to be the bad guy. So you
yeah,
have to find a way to present yourself in a way that is like protecting your reputation and who you are and what you do, without getting into the weeds or like
right.
taking it super personally. Because really, like she probably went home and got yelled at by her husband. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean
And
that
then it was
seems
like,
like a,
well, I don't want to take responsibility for this, so I better blame Paige at
a
Clean and
way.
Co. for convincing me to book this agent. I don't know.
Right. Well, and
But
I was also going to say though that it may have, or it may sometimes be the other way where someone thinks, well, you're not really a big business. Like what all you did was agree to take my photos, and now I've changed my mind, so just give me my money back because
yeah,
you're just a mom sitting here who's going to take my photos. And so how you present yourself as a business, not like a big box everywhere kind of business, but also not just someone who had a chat on the phone and can now just send your money back because it's fine. It
yeah,
doesn't really matter. This is not like Venmoing money for a dinner and then changing your mind you're going to go with your pals. This is like a business which incurs costs and has admin, which if she didn't see your studio assistant when she was in, maybe she didn't even appreciate that you had other levels of costs beyond just having a chat and then like asking for her deposit. So I think, and that too is what you and I talk about a lot as we think about those emails you send all the way through the system of being consistent about how you talk about your business so people understand. If you want to present yourself as and I don't mean it like this, but like just a mom who takes photos, then be consistent about that all the way through so that everyone has that same expectation and you don't suddenly start talking about administrative fees
right,
when you have a conversation with a client who's like, but that's not the way you talk to me in any of your other emails or texts.
right.
So being consistent about how your business sounds is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of this stuff just all comes back to everything that you do, Jill, is just like brand voice, brand voice, brand voice. Like, how do you explain yourself in a way that feels true to you and your business and like how you choose to present it?
Well, and one of the other things before, and we will get into the detail of showing you some of what we talked about with the AIs, but before we even get into that, you had mentioned, Paige, that a lot of people would say, just refund her the money, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And we compared this to the 5 year ago version of asking AI, which was go to a Facebook group and ask people, what should I do in this situation when I have this nightmare client? And the truth is, you can get as many answers as the people that reply, and they are not necessarily the right answer for your business.
Yeah, and people are polarized on that sort of stuff. Like there was one the other day that I was reading about, and it was like a mom had requested all these changes to this photographer's contract, and a bunch of people were like, red flag, fire her as a client, like get her out of there. You don't want to work with her, and like just out of their minds with because one of the things that this woman wanted her to do was to wear a mask. And the photographer said she didn't want to wear a mask. She didn't want to adhere to that request. And all these photographers said, no, no, like red flag, get her out of there. You don't, like that's ridiculous. She can't tell you to wear a mask. And then the other half were like, why is this such a big deal? It's just a mask. Don't you want to keep this client? She's not asking for anything like that out of the ordinary here. So why would you like fire a client over a
Mhm.
mask? So, like, I mean, masks are always a kind of polarizing topic anyway,
Right.
but this sort of contract stuff is always going to get you different opinions from
Mhm.
different people. So you have to be pretty clear on like, well, what feels right to you?
Yeah.
What feels fair? Like, does it feel fair to keep her whole $700 because that's what your contract says? Like, that's one way to look at it.
Yeah, I
So,
think, and as an ex-lawyer, I would be like, keep the money. As a
yeah,
business owner, I would not say keep the money. But in my old days as a lawyer, I would have been like, what are you talking about? Just reply and say that's the contract terms,
yeah.
which just goes to show how the place we are in our business and life changes that. And I think that's the real key. AI is not really any different unless you prompt it particularly. It's not any different than a random business owner replying in Facebook. So they don't know your business unless you tell them everything about your business, which you can do for AI, and we're going to talk about that. They don't know the details of your business and what feels right and wrong for you. And I really strongly feel about this at the moment a lot because I help clients use AI. Do not outsource strategic business decisions to another person or AI. Right? It's your business decision to make. It's not AI's decision or some random person on Facebook's decision.
Well,
So
and I
what's
think
right
that
for your
you can
business?
ask AI those things. Like
Hmm.
you shouldn't say, "How should I handle this?" You should say, "Give me a list of ways that this could possibly be handled."
Hmm.
And then it might spit out 10 different ways that you can handle it.
And
And
you
then you're
decide.
like, "Oh, this is the one that feels good to me. Okay, let's explore that further."
Yeah.
I mean, like that's how I use AI is
Right.
I allow it to like give me some options when I just don't know. Because sometimes things come up and you're like, I hadn't ever thought about this. Like, I don't know. How do I respond to this
Yeah.
person?
Maybe that is a good option. Or sometimes saying, I want to do this. Can you help me figure out how to say it? You're not
Yeah.
asking it to reply just blank. You're saying, here's sort of how I would like to go with this. Can you make this wording sound better?
Yeah.
So I think one of the things we should probably mention at this point, as we think about sharing some of the language that we put through the AI models, is that you use AI a lot in your business, which I'm all for. Clap, clap, clap. But the key is that your AI understands your business. So can you tell us a little bit about how you make sure it knows what your business is?
Yeah, so I had this amazing business mentor last year, and she was the one that kind of introduced me to this idea of using AI. Like, I mean, I know now it's becoming more and more common. A lot of people use it all the time, but her whole thing was you need to know who you are first. So she was like, "Who's your ideal client? What does she look like? Make up a name for her. How old is she? What is her income level? What does her husband do? Does she have a husband? Is she married? Does she have other kids? Like." All those factors for the ideal client, right? And then what does your business look like? How is it structured? What's your pricing? All your packages? What's your social media style? Like, how do you like to talk on social media? Do you give like tips and tricks, or are you just like, oh my God, look at this adorable baby? Like all those little things about like how you like to do things are all like in an actual document that she had me do all that stuff first and foremost. And I was like, I've done this. Like at first I was really annoyed about it because she was like, well, no, I want you to go through this template and fill out these things and tell me about your business. And I was like, okay, yeah, yeah. But it did make me realize that I had gaps in that thing, that knowledge of like, oh, I guess I don't have like an actual like contract weather policy for outdoor sessions. Like maybe I do need that, little details of that. So I filled out all these different documents for my ideal client avatar, the way I like to talk, everything I could possibly think of for my business, she had me do. And then you take those documents and you put them into your system. So I don't know how ChatGPT works because I use Claude. So I'm not as familiar with the process. But in Claude, you have these different project folders, and each of those folders has different information. So I have a flow and format project that has all the information about what Jill and I do
This
and
stuff.
how we talk to you guys and how who I am, who Jill is, what we're trying to sell, what we're trying to build, and like the resources we're trying to create. And it is separate from
Mhm.
all my Clean and Co stuff. And that works really well for me because I don't want it to bring in stuff about my Clean and Co photography business when I'm talking about flow and format.
Or vice versa.
Yeah, and same thing for like I have my own like editing courses and newborn photographer education.
Mhm.
And that's another project.
Different
Like I
projects.
have three, right? Because
And
that client is totally
totally
different than the
different,
new
right?
mom in Boise. That's
But
a
they're
new
also kind of
on the world.
overlap, which is why it's really
Yeah.
important to have separate projects because otherwise you're using terminology across all three projects, across all three businesses that are the same. And so if it's
Yeah.
not very clear, and by which I mean you have made it very clear, then the AI doesn't know which one it is. I want to also just quickly jump in and say this we're talking about here is what a good copywriter will do for a business. I've
Yeah.
been thinking about this a lot because we say that the thing that we deliver is copy, is writing. But a good copywriter has to get the answers to all those questions so they write the correct thing. And we either ask you for that information, and more likely when we ask for it, we discover that there are gaps in the knowledge, and then we help you with the strategy. So that's when we do messaging and positioning and brand voice, is really digging into what's your strategy here? And we ask
Yeah.
you the strategy. We don't make the strategy up for you. We ask you what yours is. And then we use that to create the end product of writing. And really, when we bring an AI in, it's doing the end product of writing. But if you have not given it the strategy, it's just going to make it up, confidently make it up, or guess, or go out and outsource what are most people saying in this situation. So
Yeah.
again, like although we say, "Oh my goodness, AI is amazing," and it is, we really need to think about it as just one step in the process of explaining your business, and strategy is not its step.
Yeah.
Strategy is your step, and if you input it, it can do a great job of writing for you.
Yeah, and I think that's the part that people underestimate is like if you don't know what to tell it, like I was giving you an example this morning of like I was asking it to analyze my website and it gave me all these like, oh, you should change this headline to this and I said like why? That doesn't make sense to me. And so I said using your best SEO practices and best AI SEO practices, how would you change the copy? Like had to redo that prompt. And then it gave me totally different answers. And it said, oh, okay, yes, you're right. You should do this, this, and this instead. But if I hadn't known to ask it to use SEO friendly and AI SEO friendly terms, I would have just gotten copy and like put it in and hoped for the best, right? So,
And it would not have admitted it didn't include that. So the thing that's
right.
frustrating, and if the people listening have used, if you've used AI before, you'll have noticed this. But if you're new to AI sounds incredibly confident about everything
Yeah.
it does. It doesn't have this human sense of saying, well, do you know what? I don't actually know the SEO side, but here's what I think as the equivalent of your mom at the dinner table looking at your website, which
Yeah.
is like, well, thanks, mom at the dinner table. But like, what about if I showed this to an expert? What would they say? Oh, well,
Yeah.
and so being aware that it will always agree with you, but it doesn't mean it knows. It doesn't have that base knowledge underneath. And so you either have to have the base knowledge or be aware that it has a gap there or
Yeah.
ask it what knowledge it's based it on, or just being aware that you can't just copy and paste what it says and then use it without double checking, which is again that like take ownership of it's still your output at the end of the day that you're responsible for, even if you get AI to write it for you.
Yeah, I think the thing that I use the AI, well, not use AI the most for, but do with AI the most is argue with it. Because I put a prompt in, I get my answer, and then I say, wait, but that math is not right. So go back and redo it with that correct math, or like it'll misunderstand my pricing, or not phrase it in a way that I want it to sound, or so, like, oh, well, that sounds way too professional. Go back and read my brand voice guide again and recreate this 50% less formal or
Right.
something like
And
that.
so again, that like you can't just copy and paste what it says. You have to like look at it, decide, is this a right? And especially if it comes to your own business, is this truly representative of what I want my business to do? So I'm going to actually share the screen at the moment. That's not what I'm going to do. I need to find the
Yeah.
screen share. And we can show you what we did was we put, can you, yes. And I'm going to just pull this up a little bigger so we can see it. We put the questions, Paige put a set of questions through Claude, which is the AI that she uses. Now, I also use Claude mostly, but I also pay for chat because I sometimes talk to clients about it. And so I ran it through Claude, which through Chat GPT, which knows nothing about Paige's business at all, so that we could look at the difference in what happens when your system is somewhat closed, which means you've given it your strategy and your information, versus what happens when you just use like a blank AI, which I'm going to say is the equivalent of Paige's mom. Paige's mom with the internet. Like what happens when you ask these two different things, what's going on? Um, so the first thing that I really wanted to show people to think about is this thread, as Paige thought through what she might want to say by email and by telephone call, is 15 pages long in a Google Doc. This is not, she just didn't type in like, what should I reply to this message? And then got an answer and pasted it into an email. There was a lot of back and forth and thinking about, is this what the person really wants to hear? So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that thought process as you went through it, Paige.
Yeah. So the first thing that I asked was just like, so the session fee is $700. Like, what happens? How do I respond to this person? She wants to know her options, and I said that $1,800 of the total price would be refundable if, or $1,180 of the total price would be refundable if she wanted to cancel. She wants to know what would happen if she just canceled the newborn shoot and kept the maternity. How can I answer that? So when I was first getting her messages, that's where she had left it with me. So this is prior to me receiving her email saying that she thought I should do the right thing and refund everything.
This,
So the first question is, how do I answer this in a way that explains, because I knew what I wanted to say. I wanted to tell her that she could use the fees that she had paid towards her maternity shoot. But how do I explain that in a way that is clear and gets my point across and makes it like these are her options basically.
mhm.
And so it gave me these refund calculations of what she paid. Like she paid $1,800. If you keep only the maternity session, you would get it would be $790 refund calculation. You'd get 1090. And so this means you'd receive 1090 rather than 1180. We discussed for a full cancellation since you'd be paying the regular maternity session fee without the combo discount. Please let me know if you'd like to proceed. And so then my next question to it was, yeah, but then she's not getting dinged at all for canceling early. I'm just allowing her to cancel, which didn't really feel fair to me. Like I wanted her to have some sort of skin in the game. And I was going to be fair. I was going to be
Hmm.
fair in the sense that like I was going to put that towards her package, but not just let her out of it.
Yeah.
And so that next question was, well, I basically want her to have to keep $990 worth of it for the maternity session, 790, which is what our normal price for a maternity session is, plus the $200 newborn fee that would have been a cancellation fee, but now could be applied to our bigger
And I
package.
just want to show around this. This is where Paige's prompts are in yellow. So as Claude explained the last one, it talks about how great it is. Then Paige pushes back a little and it says, You're absolutely right. Every time you do a prompt with any form of AI, it does this. It will not tell you that you're wrong. Even if objectively a business strategist or somebody else who does what you do and has a lot of knowledge would say this is the wrong approach, it's very hard to get your AI to tell you that without expressly saying, critique my choice in the next question.
Yeah.
And even then, it doesn't always do it very well. So, like, that's the part to be aware of. This can make you feel great and
Yeah,
make
it's
you think you're
confirmation bias.
right.
It
It makes you think you're going down the right path, and you may have completely started to go down the wrong path. So, just be
yeah.
aware of that as you're using the prompts.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. So it then explained, these are the two different options. If you cancel it with the fee, if you apply the newborn session to an upgrade, here are the options.
and then I'm going to skip over to our chat one. So this is where I use Chat GPT to go through the options because the next part that I'm way at the bottom. Let me move it back up. Yeah, the next part that you asked about was, well, maybe she would want to modify the package to something slightly different, and you have some other upgrades. Like maybe if she just wants, because at one point she'd said
What
the
if I just kept the maternity
just
session?
keep the maternity.
Yeah.
And that's where I think it's key that we know that in your system, where you've given it information, Claude knows what your other packages are. So you
Yeah.
can just say, or what would happen if I used the modern collection or the signature? Now, in this one, you did give numbers, but
Mhm.
if it knows about what you do, you don't even necessarily have to do that. But when you ask Chat GPT about this that doesn't know anything about how your system works, it really all it does is tell the person they can spend more money, but it
Yeah.
doesn't tell them what value they would get out of that money. So if you like this email basically says another great option instead of canceling is to apply what you've paid to a larger package, and then it explains how much more money you can pay. And then it says, let me know if you'd like details on the packages. Like if I got that, I would be like, why do I'm trying to
Yeah.
spend less
Why are you
money?
trying to convince me to spend more? Yeah.
And there may
Yeah.
be valid
Really
reasons
funny.
too, and Claude might be able to explain those, which might, and in fact, it did. It talked about how it was like a more personalized session that you would get. It may, for example, and I don't know for yours if this is true or not, but it may include like hair and makeup where a base package wouldn't or something. But because ChatGPT doesn't know anything about your offers and what you do, unless you include that in the prompt, it's giving you an email which honestly, as a person reading it, this would not make me want to go and buy a bigger package because it gives me no
No.
reasons to
Well,
let
it
go.
also, like, at the beginning of the email, it talks about canceling the newborn session, but then it says you could upgrade either session,
Right.
maternity or newborn. So you're like, well, wait, what is it talking about? Like, I want to cancel one of my sessions,
Yeah.
not upgrade both of them.
Right. So it's not even really, and that's the kind of thing where you have to read it, even in these uncomfortable situations, like you are the annoyed client, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you read this, would this be acceptable to you? And I would be like, no, I need to add more information about the package. But at this point, because Paige just wants this email out the door and sent to the client, she would have to now go get that information, copy and paste it in, or summarize it in some way. But when she puts this through Claude, it knows this information and it can, you could give it a little prompt that said you didn't include the details, and then maybe it would. So
Yeah.
there's a lot more work, even though ChatGPT is giving us a kind of reasonable template on how to reply. The details of it are not very helpful for your business.
Well, and I think it's really important to note here too, if you have different session types or different things included in whatnot packages, like I only have hair and makeup included in my luxury package. And so I don't want Chat or Claude to say, and professional hair and makeup is included. Because then if I just send that email to my client and they go, oh, great, okay, perfect. Yeah, let's keep the maternity session, hair and makeup's included. Perfect. And then I look back at it later and I'm like, what are you talking about? Professional hair and makeup is not included in my maternity sessions. It's an add-on.
But
And she
it's
goes,
too
well,
late.
no, your email says it's
Yeah.
included. And
And if you've
now, like,
sent it,
that's on me. That's
mhm.
my bad. That is something that I'm absolutely going to eat as a
Right.
cost because
Because you've
I
messed
said
up.
it. I put it in an email. I screwed that
And
up.
that comes back to strategy. You may choose as part of this negotiation to say, guess what? If you move up to the bigger package, I'll throw in hair and makeup. And then actually it's not so bad pricing. There's a situation where you might include that in a negotiation, but that has to be your strategic business decision, not an accident because ChatGPT just suggested it, because it's maybe the kind of thing it sees when it goes searches the internet of how people respond to those kind of claims.
Yeah.
Um, One of the other things I noticed in both of them is that they talk about, for both ChatGPT and on your Claude one, it talked about this modifying the costs. And you had said, well, it's not a modification fee. Like it's not, I'm not charging $200. It's that it should have been charged anyway. And so you had to explain, push back on that for both AIs. And that's another thing that you have to look at is like you're responsible for reading it. And if you read it and it says modification fee and you're like, well, that doesn't really explain what I'm doing. And I could imagine a client getting annoyed that I'm charging them a modification fee. Then you have to say to it, please rephrase this and call it something different. And again, take ownership of like how this sounds when it goes out to the client.
I mean, I think really what you have to treat AI as is like your assistant that knows everything about your business. If you've given her all the details and you put all those things into your project knowledge, then she knows this is how we do business, but she's not right all the time. She's
Mhm.
still not going to respond like you do, or
Yeah.
he's not, right? So if I tell her to write this email for me and then I look at it and I like my studio manager's name is Jen. So if I was like, Jen, like I don't want to say it like that though, because that's really confusing.
Yeah.
She'd go, oh, okay. And she'd go back and write it again. Or like if I had hired you to be my copywriter and I was like, but Jill, I wouldn't say it like that. Like, can you rewrite it for me and say this?
Yeah.
Like you need to use it in that way where you're like, I'm now the editor. I don't have to write it anymore, which is lovely because I'm not a writer, but I still have to edit it. I
And
still
you
have to make
still
sure what I want to say.
need to check it and have ownership of it, because if you're sending it out, who regardless of who wrote it, just like if Jen wrote something and messed up, you would still be responsible for that if it goes out on your
Absolutely.
company as a business. It's the same with AI. You are responsible for what you send regardless of how it gets written. And I think that other thing about brand voice, like how you sound, is key, because especially if it comes in an email, you're aware that the person reading it is kind of defensive already. If all of your emails have had a very warm, friendly, and you've always used I in them, I can't wait to see you, I'm excited, my business is going to do this. And then suddenly that you get a slightly stiffer, more formal sounding, and it talks about we as a business. Like that would put me on edge if I'm a person who's arguing with you about the details of the contract, because suddenly it's like you've gone formal on me, you've gone into full business mode. It may worry you that like a lawyer's got involved, like who knows what's actually going on kind of subconsciously in there, but it will feel wrong if it goes very much from one tone to another tone if you're in the middle of an awkward conversation at the same time. So that's where, like, when we create templates for the business, we very much think we have like 12 different kind of tones and voices that we write them in so that you can, and the goal is you pick the one that sounds most like you, because they're going to
Yeah.
meet you at the end or at some point at the beginning and you want everything to sound consistent.
Well, and
And
also
well, this
though,
too.
the business strategy is a big part of the way that you talk because if somebody is a all-inclusive photographer, they're going to speak to their clients very differently. Not tone of voice necessarily, but the topics are very
Hmm.
different. The way that you explain something is very different. If I'm like, here's all your files versus you have to come back and do an ordering appointment. Like
Hmm.
we need to have you need to differentiate those things so that you're clear with your clients. And that's a big part of the way that we built our voices too.
Right. And so if your AI, which we'll call like your assistant, um, if it knows your business, it and you have told it how you want to sound, and you can tell it by thinking about that and explaining how you want to sound. You can also tell it by just using tons of examples. So if you say here's 23 emails that are consistently in my voice, it's going to be closer. Now, if you have like used a set of templates like we have that are already all in a consistent voice, if you've decided you like that and then you upload all those emails into your AI, it's going to know that any other email has to be written in the same style as all of those ones.
Yeah.
And if you have got your emails kind of, you've written some, you've maybe had an assistant write some, you've maybe used a free download of one welcome email from somewhere, and they all sound different, then it's just going to be really hard for AI to understand what your tone is in the first place. And so it just like an assistant trying to look through all your stuff to see how to write it is just not really going to know how to do it in a way that sounds like you.
Yeah, my old studio manager loved emojis and exclamation points.
Exclamation points.
And then
I
I'd
would
be
always know when I got
crazy.
something that they'd written.
Yeah, yeah. I
Um,
constantly was yelling at her. It's like I yell at Claude now instead.
there you go, it's just the same. And so then one of the other things that I wanted to mention that I noticed in here as I was reading it through, so this was the section about modification fees. Like, so I'm not certainly not going to read this, but this is an example of a prompt you gave. Look how long this is. You really had to explain what was going on. This is not like a two sentences and it'll write it for you. Um,
Well, but to point that part out, that's when I got the email from her saying that I needed to do the right thing. And so I put that in there almost as like a rant.
mhm.
Like I needed to like tell it like that I was upset about this situation and why I was feeling that way and then give me advice on how to stay professional. So that's what I was using it for in that regard of like keep me on track here. I know I'm mad and I'm not going to say the right thing. So how do I adjust my behavior so that I can come across as a professional businesswoman and not an emotional mom with a camera.
Right. And if you've ever chatted to your friend who said, "Oh, I just need to rant about my husband and it's fine, like it'll be over once we've done this, but just let me do this rant first." You can do that with your AI. You can
Yeah.
just rant to it about your business situation. It won't pass that information on, it will filter out that emotion. And maybe that helps you release some of the emotion into the wild as well. So there may be a benefit to that too.
Yeah, you can
Um,
actually use AI as your therapist. Just have a little project knowledge about all the things that your husband does that annoy you.
yeah, although I do hear therapists also question whether you get good outputs from that, but that's a
Probably not. I mean, it's confirmation bias, right? It's always going to
exactly.
tell you that you're in the right in that argument.
Well, but the next thing I wanted to point out was that this was obviously the point where you knew you had to have a call. And that's the point where, again, you had to make a decision. AI cannot tell you it's time for a phone call. You needed to know, I need to get on the phone with this person. And there is definitely that human quality of you can hear, are they escalating and being defensive? This is just not going anywhere. Are they starting to see your side of things? Are they getting upset? Maybe something completely different is going on that they've never mentioned. And now that you have this additional context, things are different.
Yeah.
So what you did here that I think is great is you explained it all and then said, "Can you help me create a script?" Not that you would read it word for word, but like, can you help me figure out how to create a structure to have a phone call so that you don't get off track and cover all the important points that you wanted to cover?
Mhm.
So this was great, but then here is the next point, which is I think is really important, is you say, I want more of a question-based format because what both chat and Claude came back with was kind of walls of text that you would say to this person on the phone, which we all know is not an ideal way of doing it. And obviously, it said that's a great approach, even though it didn't do it.
Smart.
So they both came out with like alternatives in how you could kind of ask questions. And then what I liked is it gives alternatives of things they might say and then how you might respond to them. So it allows you to read through and think through all of that before you get on the phone.
Yeah, and that was the thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to like prepare myself for whatever she was going to say. And like, okay, how am I going to respond if she says this? How am I going to respond if she says that? And be able to like visualize the conversation before it happened so that I could keep my cool while we were
Yeah,
talking.
which I think is vital. And I do think a lot in the past we've probably done these with peers. I know you and I have had those kind of on Marco Polo, like, oh, okay, my goodness, I'm going to have to talk to a client tomorrow. What shall I do? And it's sometimes that you don't even need another person to answer, even. It's like just the practice of going through it. But to be able to do that practice now in AI, so you don't need somebody around, and also it knows about your business. And I think that's the key part is if it understands what you do because you've inputted all that data. So like that was one of the parts I noticed as we put this through ChatGPT, which doesn't have any information about Paige's business, is she wanted to suggest this idea that they could maybe there could maybe be like oh, this is actually not the part I was thinking about. This one was where it misunderstood what your starting session would be. So
Oh,
ChatGPT just guessed that every starting fee was 200, which is actually not at all how your business is run. And so it's now going into this full explanation that just is not accurate for who you are and what you do.
Yeah, and that was the difference between chat and Claude because it didn't understand that we have different session fees.
Right, exactly. Which is, and then if you're just kind of in a rush and you copy and paste that, you may miss something like that. And then you're getting yourself in a much bigger problem because the client says, wait, I thought you said it was this.
I
And
paid 700. Why? It's only 200?
mhm, exactly. So, um, I think also, yes, you had said, oh, maybe we could use it for a baby registry option. And I know about your registry option. So when I read the summary that ChatGPT gave, it just wasn't right. It just didn't feel like it accurately explained what goes on in with your registry session. And so
Yeah.
I felt like it was confusing. And I think it was confusing because it didn't fully understand the details. But again, instead of saying to you, well, I don't have enough information, could you tell me more so I can explain this? It just confidently guesses
Yeah.
and just either misses things or maybe adds something in that is just not true to your business. Um, so yeah, so that is how it went. Would you would you like to tell us the end result of that conversation?
Oh, yeah. Well, the end result was that she called and just said that her husband had booked both the newborn and the maternity, and she didn't know, and that they just wanted to cancel everything. So I actually didn't need any of those talking points. I did explain to her that it would normally be 700, but that I understood it was only an hour later, and so I would only charge her our smallest session fee, which is 200. And she accepted that and was like, okay, great, let's do that. Let's just cancel everything.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. And so then I went and refunded her card. So it for me, it was a lovely resolution. Yes, it was annoying. Yes, I would have loved to keep her as a client because I thought our conversation was great and I was excited about it. But when a client gets to that point where they've flipped the script and now they're mad, I don't want to force that person to continue working with
Yeah.
me. I
You're
just
not
don't.
going to get
It's
good
gonna,
images, and particularly the way you sell, you're not going to be able to sell a ton of images off it, probably.
right.
But I think what's key is you didn't come out of this with her ranting on your Google business
Well, not so
page.
far, not yet anyway.
Yeah, that's true. But it sounds like it resolved in a way which, like, everyone was sort of unhappily happy.
Yeah.
Like, this is not ideal, but also it's not the worst situation I could be in. And I get the feeling that's also how she felt. She probably
Yeah.
doesn't want to be out $200, but she still signed the contract. And I think that's where, even though you didn't get to use all this, what we often talk about is what can you learn for your business for the next time when things like this happen. So it
Yeah.
sounds to me like you have a few kind of like, well, at least I've thought about this, or
Well,
maybe I'll
so
change how I do
what
that.
I did two things. So I added a clause into my contract that says that if you cancel within 48 hours, it's a $200
There
cancellation
you
fee.
go. Love it.
So I added that specific wording. And the other thing that I did is I put all of that in a cancellation policy, like page on the bottom in like the junk drawer of my website so
Great.
that if someone doesn't sign the contract or has any questions about it, it's right there. So I updated everything on the website to reflect that. And then everything on the like frequently asked questions, what's refundable, what's not. I very clearly stated the session fees are not, and the base packages are up to 30 days. So that it just kind of like gives it a little bit more transparency to be like, hey, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Like it's all over my website. I explain it. You signed it in the contract. Like I'm not trying to hide this. I'm not trying to like blindside you with this detail that you didn't know. This is how it works.
And I think it means you've already thought through what's fair. So, like that 48
Yeah.
hour sense is like, that's fair, where before 48 hours, okay, yes, there's less work. I can, but after 48 hours, I'm planning things around your project now. And so, if this is to come up in the future, and let's hope not for you, you've already set the boundaries. And because
Yes.
sometimes I think as we're trying to figure out how to set a boundary, because we've just not addressed it in our contract or it's not come up before, our unsureness can lead into a client thinking it's unfair because you're, oh, maybe they're going to let it go. Oh, now they're not.
Right.
Whereas if this happens again, it's very clear what the rules are and how it's
Yeah.
supposed.
Well, and the other thing that I will definitely do from now on is have them just sign the contract here in
Mhm.
person.
Yeah,
Um, I never thought it was that big of a deal because I've never had this issue before. Everyone just signs it when they get home and it's fine.
yeah,
But I've never had anyone cancel within an hour,
right.
especially somebody like whenever somebody's like on the edge of like, I think they're really unsure, I send them home without booking.
Yeah,
Like I
yeah,
do that all the time where I go, it sounds like you really need to think about it some more. Go home, talk to your husband, like work out whether this is the right fit for you guys, and then just let me know.
yeah,
And if they're a good fit, they'll call me and we'll just get it booked. And if they're not, they'll go away before this happens.
yeah.
So I felt like I've been pretty careful about that. And this is the one situation where I was overly confident that she felt good and was happily booked and then wasn't.
Right.
So,
And sometimes you just can't predict those. Do you know, it sounds
right.
like based on all your experience, you were right to think that. And it's just one of those blips that come up in business. And I've had those things happen before as well. I think I'm
Yeah.
going to assume that everybody listening, if you haven't had it happen already, I'm so sorry. It's going to happen to you sometimes. It's just part of doing business that we have to absorb. However, really being strategic about it and thinking, okay, what can I learn from it so that I can maybe reduce the chances of it, or just take up less mental energy with it if it happens again so that you can move on to finding
Yeah.
a client.
Well, I think that's the whole point. It's like you have this contract so that when they come back and say, "Hey, I want a refund," you can go, "Hey, see where you initialed right here? That's where it says you have
Yeah.
to pay $20."
I also had I have had one of those before where a client cancelled like within an hour of having booked. And I let the whole thing go at that point, but I didn't have fees and it was real easy just to let it go. But
Yeah.
now when people say, "Oh, like what's the situation?" I'll be like, "Well, I have had, it can be a funny story you tell. It's like, look, I need you to sign here because guess what? I did have somebody once cancel within 5 hours and then we had to discuss what the cancellation, what fees they were left with." So
Yeah.
sometimes it can allow you to have those conversations with future clients in a sort of enjoyable but pointing out the boundary way.
I used to be really scared to have those conversations, like especially, about packages and pricing and all that. Like, well, what if they say no? And I think the thing that's really important to remember is if they say no, they shouldn't be your client. Like
Exactly.
it's just if you present them with your contract and they go, whoa, 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 I don't like this. Okay, so
That's
don't
a
book.
red flag. Yeah,
Keep
yeah.
booking
Yeah.
me.
Or go think about it and be really clear because this is
Yeah.
my contract. There's not really any changing it. Or if there is changing it, you agree to it. But the contract's the point where it becomes real. So yeah, if they're not sure at that point, they need to think about it for longer.
Yeah.
Not you. All right. Well, I think we probably covered what I think we need to. One thing that Paige and I are probably going to work on, because I think it would be real helpful for a lot of you, is a little video where we show you actually behind the scenes in Paige's Claude. Do you have a name for Claude, or do you just call him Claude?
Scotland Claude.
Just call him Claude. Um, but I think it might be really useful for those of you who haven't seen how it works to see all your, not the details of your documents, but just to see how many documents and how much information you have in there that
Yeah.
allows it to create for you, um, as opposed to when you write something and you haven't put it in your project and it doesn't know anything about
I think I have like 25 different pieces of content in there.
yeah. So we are going to create something like that soon. And if you're interested in finding out more about it, you can reply in the comments on the video if you're watching this on the replay. And we will let you know when it's available.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Well, fingers crossed your next client, potential client goes better than that one, Paige.
Yes. They usually do. It's a rare blip, but
A
good
rare blip.
example for this call. All
Yeah, definitely. Excellent. And we'll see you all next month.
right, bye.
Bye.